let's talk about Donald Trump and Ford. So this is one of those things where Donald Trump and business people, they know the game, and they know the game well. So Ford announced today that they are no longer going to be moving a factory, building a $1.6 billion plant in Mexico. They are going to instead invest $700 million to expand a Michigan hybrid car factory. Ford's chief executive officer said that the move was, quote, a vote of confidence in the economic policies of President-elect Trump. Yeah, okay. And so the production, the expanded production. So instead of going and spend $1.6 billion in Mexico, they're going to expand production in Michigan and yield a total of 700 additional jobs. So, I mean, yay, congratulations for those 700 people, right? Listen, have I ever been jobless? I can't remember when I was jobless, but I have worked jobs so crappy that I almost was homeless in working. So I don't take for granted when a single individual gets a job. That means something, right? Or when an individual gets a raise, that actually means something, right? So for those 700 people, good on them. Congratulations. Here's the squeeze, though. Here's the joke. So Donald Trump tweeted out before, or almost simultaneously with the Ford's announcement, letting them know that their companies are going to have to make and manufacture in the USA or pay a big border tax. And then a few seconds later, or almost simultaneously, Ford came out and said that they're no longer going to produce in Mexico. The average American put one and one together and say, oh, Ford is doing what Donald Trump wants. Ford is caving in and obeying Donald Trump. And you have people just scurrying all around the country now saying, yay, look at what Donald Trump did. Ford is coming back, blah, 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 blah. Well, you know what? Not so, it's not that clear cut. And actually, it's not that at all. So a few hours before Ford's announcement, Trump complained also about GM. And this is where he gave, all the quotes that he gave. But the trick is small production like the Ford Focus, it's still going to Mexico. And it's going to an existing plant. And the CEO of Ford has made it clear in his announcement. It's funny how people listen to one part, but not the whole announcement. In the rest of his announcement, he let it be known that this decision is actually a business decision. This is a decision because it's no longer based on their forecast. It's no longer going to be profitable for them to move that plant or create that plant in Mexico. He's actually stated, he said, quote, we reached the point where we believe we could get capital savings by abandoning the new plant. Period. So Donald Trump, being the master of the media that he is running around the country acting as though he has somehow miraculously, or just by his sheer presence. This is what this blah, blah, blah. This is what this man wants you to believe, that his sheer presence, it changes things. And some of you actually believe this, but it's a game that's being played. The game is this: Ford has adjusted their forecast based on a couple of factors, not to mention the cost of labor, not to mention their independent business model, but also based on the forthcoming tax breaks, corporate tax breaks that Donald Trump is going to give. These corporate tax breaks are huge. I think they're going down from 35% to 15%. This is a windfall for corporations. This is what they mean when they said earlier, they said that this is a vote of confidence in the economic policies of Donald Trump. This is not a vote of confidence in the tariffs and the border tax that they have to pay to, not the tariffs, but the border tax to bring their production back over. They have zero confidence in that. Businesses have absolute confidence in not having to play with 35% corporate tax, but rather play with a 15% corporate tax. And what I mean by play, I mean getting in and adjusting it down to zero, because that's essentially what they're doing anyway with their effective tax rates. So their vote of confidence is in Donald Trump's gutting of the American economic tax coffers, in exchange for tax breaks for their corporations. So these corporations have no problem. Why would they fight against Trump on making things in the United States when, one, it's more economically viable for them to make it in the United States? According to Ford, he said it just makes no sense. He said, quote, in the same statement, he said, quote, "We reached the point where we believe we could get capital savings by abandoning the new plan." Nothing to do with Trump. But then, two, why would they fight against Trump when they're getting ready to get the biggest tax break they've ever gotten in their lives? So what they do is they play along and say, yes, Big Daddy Trump, we are doing exactly what you want us to do. So long as you give us those tax breaks, you can say that you personally came to Mexico and shut our shit down. They don't care. They want that tax break because it is a windfall for them. And yet you have, it's the same thing with Carrier, right? So the first thing that he took credit for, first thing he took credit for was Carrier. But what people didn't realize, those 1,000 jobs, that was in exchange for $7 million in tax incentives from the state of Indiana. $7 million in tax incentives, in addition to the corporate tax breaks they're getting ready to receive from Donald Trump. So Donald Trump is managing to do two things. He's managing to play the card of economic populists, protectionism, and doing things for the working class, while simultaneously not doing anything for the working class, but giving a windfall to corporations. I mean, sure, this is going to help the 700 people who got their jobs from Ford. It's going to help the 1,000 people, or maybe 1,500, I forgot the exact number, who are going to keep their jobs at Carrier. And again, I don't belittle that because I have been in those situations. I understand the value of one person having a job saved. I get it. But in terms of the overall economic paradigm, it is not scalable. He is not going to be able to give $7 million in tax incentives from every single state to every corporation that's threatening to go overseas. If they realize that they could get that from him, then Donald Trump becomes their bitch, right? Donald Trump then gets to turn around, the corporations then get to turn around and say, well, we're going overseas, and Donald Trump is going to try to save face by getting some tax incentives and some tax breaks. It's not scalable, it's not tenable, it's not sustainable, but it's good for politics. And it's good for a news cycle because very few people are going to actually listen to the entire speech from the Ford CEO, and very few people are going to stick around long enough to realize that the Carrier deal was simply a giveaway. That money every dime that leaves the government, leaves from infrastructure projects, leaves from safety nets, leaves from education. They are gutting the American system, making people think that he's doing something for the working class. Hendricks, the CEO, this is the last thing I'll say about this. He said the revised forecast didn't justify building an entirely new plant. Now, who's talking about that today versus, oh, Donald Trump tweeted and the CEOs did what he said? We don't have enough time to debunk all of the bullshit that we're getting ready to go through. What we're going to have is we're going to have a bunch of people who seriously believe that Donald Trump's presence alone causes these types of changes and will not investigate or research enough to realize these companies were either going to do these moves. First of all, let's be clear. The companies, let's be logical, which is a little bit too much to ask of some people who love Donald Trump. There's not a single company that's going to make a business decision that is not going to benefit their bottom line. It's practically in every single charter. Any decision that's not benefiting their bottom line is like a fireable offense. You know, you don't stick around if you're making bad business decisions. If it is more profitable for them to still go over to Mexico, they will do it. They see that it's no longer profitable, not because of the threat of taxes from Donald Trump, but because it just doesn't fit their business model anymore. And if they could stroke Donald Trump's ego by saying, oh, you know, we have confidence in his pro-growth economic policies in order to sustain and promote and get that tax break, every CEO around this country will line up and kiss Donald Trump's ass so that they can get that tax break. Bottom line in the conversation. But it has absolutely zero to do with Donald Trump's presence.